Lawyers of Reddit, what was the weirdest case you worked on? Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Our client saved a woman who had drowned at the edge of a lake. She didn't have a pulse. Our client pulled her ashore and gave her CPR, as he was the only adult in the area and the only person certified to give CPR. This was about 15 miles from the nearest hospital, so if he didn't act she would die. During the course of the chest compressions, he bruised 2 of her ribs and cracked another. This is actually fairly common when performing CPR. He was able to resuscitate the woman, saving her life. She survived with no long-lasting damage whatsoever, which was extraordinarily lucky. 2 months later she filed suit for damages, alleging battery. Which, I mean, okay, he did cause your cracked ribs. But also, without him your 2 young kids would be down a parent, and would have watched their mom die. So, dick move. Thankfully his care was considered reasonable in the jurisdiction, so he was protected by local Good Samaritan law. The suit was dismissed. Not a lawyer, but work at a law firm. There's a case where a crazy lady's neighbor was allowed to have chickens in their yard. So she bought pigs, and the hoe or city stepped in and made her get rid of them. It was a suburban area. In retaliation, this lady buys 5,000 chickens from Tyson and unleashed them into her half-acre backyard. The chickens all die, obviously. She sued the trucking company that brought the chickens for defective chickens and negligent infliction of emotional distress because her daughter had to view the gore of 5,000 dead chickens in her backyard. She was pro-SE, of course. I had a case where the plaintiff told me he caught Adolf Hitler and that he won the Medal of Honor. His attorney missed court a lot, once because her pet duck had a nostril infection. The transaction was for approximately $6 million, and when I asked him whether he had applied for financial help, he stated that he'd asked an Irishman for a loan. He could not identify the specific Irishman. This case lasted in the NY Supreme Court from 1995 to 2015. I miss it. It was so much fun. Defective vape rig exploded in a guy's pocket and burned his penis off of his body. The settlement was very large. Discovery and reviewing medical records was extremely graphic and disheartening. I cannot imagine the anguish this man went through. Living without a penis from age 30 onwards would be an absolute nightmare. I'm a lawyer, but this was actually a mediation I handled. While in law school, a woman was seeking a restraining order against another woman because she alleged she stole her zebras. I live in densely populated Southern California, so I was a bit flummoxed. Turns out the woman actually did own zebras. No evidence any were stolen, and I really don't believe they were stolen by the person she alleged to have stolen them. Apparently the cops didn't either. Other than that, I work in probate, so most of my stories are on the sad side of weird. I did have one sibling almost sue another sibling over their parents' Santa Claus collection. I also had my 50-plus-year-old client send her sister/co-trustee a gif of the evil queen while in a confrontation over the administration of a trust, and I had to explain to her why that wasn't appropriate. One time I defended an apartment complex who was sued by a blind tenant for violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. Plaintiff's gripe was she wanted a parking spot right in front of her door. Obviously, plaintiff was not capable of driving and didn't have a car. She wanted the parking spot in case friends came over. She didn't want them to have to walk as far to get to her apartment. The part that made it really weird was she already had an assigned parking spot like 3 feet away from the one she was demanding. She wanted the absolute closest parking spot to her door, or it was discrimination, even though she didn't own and couldn't operate a car. A long time also I used to do some relationship property work. Who gets what stuff after a couple splits up. In one case I represented the woman. Her ex-partner was self-represented, and he was totally crazy. He used to write long letters to my firm, addressed to the managing partner, who was a commercial lawyer, not a litigator, so he had nothing to do with the case. The letters always explained at some length that he was physically perfect, over 6 feet tall, and a genius with an IQ of 150, and that he would unleash the dogs of war and crush us all if we opposed him. Speaking of dogs, one of the main aspects of his case is that he said that after he and my client split up he bought a dog, then the dog died in a car crash because he was so sad after the breakup that he crashed his car, so now my client owed him money for the 3 years worth of dog food he'd supposedly bought. He used to ring me up and scream at me over the phone. He'd get naked and throw rocks at his neighbor's property. My client was terrified of him, and even I used to peer out of the elevator before leaving work at night in case he was waiting for me. The file was closed after he got drunk and choked to death on his own vomit at a party. Edit. I should add that while naked and throwing rocks at the neighboring property, he at all times sported an erection, which the rock throwing was intended to draw attention to. Not a lawyer, but one of the car dealerships my dad worked for had a commercial in the 80s where they used a guy dressed up in a gorilla outfit and the dealership had a whole jungle theme. In one of the commercials they said like, come down and get a new whatever car it was for 10,000 bananas. Some guy showed up with a truck full of 10,000 bananas the next week and wanted the car. It ended up in court and the banana guy won from it being deemed false advertisement. Not a lawyer, but I know a guy who was interning in a law firm and he ended up getting sued by one of the top lawyers at the firm for damages over a lost case folder. The lawyer ended up having to drop the suit a few days later when he discovered that, in the process of moving into a new office, he had just left the missing folder in his old office. This was apparently also a rite of passage, and just about everybody who works at the firm had been sued by this lawyer at some point. I guess he hadn't been fired because they knew it would be a total nightmare. Every lawyer worth his/her salt has a pro se plaintiff story. All of them are probably the lawyer's weirdest. Mine is no different. Pro se plaintiff sued an engineer who performed a home inspection following severe winds in Texas and wrote a report for the insurer that no wind damage occurred. She sued the engineer. Now, no lawyer would take the case because it was frivolous and lawyers get sanctioned for filing frivolous lawsuits. So she filed it herself. In that petition, she outlined a ceiling fan coming loose and killing her cat, that she had a summer wardrobe that got soot on it from. I have no idea the name of her dog. She also said that sometimes her dog would act up and she would roll up a newspaper and teach her dog a lesson. But rest assured, she loved her dog, that she was a good Christian woman and sang in her church. Her favorite color was pink, and 63 other pages of facts that, as you have guessed, have absolutely nothing to do with wind or engineering. Her case was dismissed because she did not attach an affidavit Texas requires when you sue an engineer. She did not let that go. Nope. She filed an appeal. She lost that appeal. She filed a petition to the Supreme Court, alleging that the Court of Appeals had no freaking idea what they were doing, that they were super corrupt and in league with the trial court judge to deprive her of her rights. The Supreme Court denied to get her review. She then filed about 6 more insane things with the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals before they threatened to hold her in contempt if she filed anything else of a frivolous nature. So some $50,000 in legal fees and a year of time later, there was a final end to it all. Legal fees would have only been $3,500 or so if we ended with the dismissal. This is why any lawyer worth his/her salt would much prefer to deal with another lawyer on the other side. The insane amount of unnecessary legal fees expended in dealing with pro se plaintiffs is egregious. Yes, they are easy cases to win, but they take a lot of effort that frankly, I'd rather spend on Reddit or something. This middle-aged, alcoholized woman died in bed one day. Her husband had sort of given up on her, just letting her do her thing, sleep in and go to the store to buy a carton of white wine every day. She would then lay in bed and drink a gallon of wine every single day. He came home and found her unconscious on the bed. When she wouldn't wake up, he described her as cold and sorta stiff. He raised her to a sitting position and tried to give her some water, but it all spilled down her gown. He proceeded to call their son, who came straight away. They didn't know what to do with her, so they carried her out, sat her in the car, taking care to fasten her seatbelt. They then drove to the and the husband went to the reception and said my wife sits in the car. DEAD. Q personnel running on the double, hauling the long dead wet wife from the car and trying to revive her. Case was about indecency with the corpse, but was of course closed due to lack of mens rea. I've worked on many strange cases, but this one kinda sticks out to me because it is both funny and sad, and because even if it would normally be a crime feeding a corpse and driving it around, it was done in confusion. And out of love for this poor woman. Thanks for sticking till the end, lads and ladies. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video.